All right, my friends, welcome to the next episode here, the Red Delta Project live feed Q&A and live stream here on the Red Delta Project YouTube channel, where we take a fundamental approach to diet and exercise, giving you more power, control, and freedom over your healthy lifestyle. As always, I'm Matt Schifferly. This week's episode is sponsored by the entirety of the Red Delta Project Library. All the books that I've written over the years, you can kind of see them over my shoulder here if you're watching on the video, where you got grind style calisthenics, suspension calisthenics, progressive micro workouts, all these books that I've assembled to make it easier for you to build muscle and strength, primarily with body weight training. Links to those are all down below, and they're available in paperback and Kindle formats. So today's episode is all about removing barriers. Barriers to what we want are everywhere. We all struggle with some degree of friction or something that is standing in our way between where we are and where we want to be. And we can work hard and we can learn everything there is to know about building strength and muscle and the science behind things. But at the end of the day, one of the best ways to get what we want and maintain it a lot easier is to get rid of a lot of the friction that's holding you back. As my former employer once told me, he was a professional mountain bike racer. He said, Matt, you can race, you can ride, you can have the best bike in the world, but man, you're just kind of heavy, which is true. When I stopped my collegiate racing career, I started to put on muscle and my performance plummeted simply because I'm now a lot heavier because I have more muscle mass. And if you want to be a cross-country mountain bike racer, that's a very bad thing. You want to be strong, but you also want to be very light. So he told me flat out, he's like, if you want to get faster, you got to lose a lot of muscle. I was like, well, that sure as hell ain't happening. But he's absolutely right. If I did want to become a much better mountain bike racer, then dropping 20, 30 pounds of muscle, particularly upper body muscle, would certainly be a hell of a lot easier and more effective than just investing in a new set of wheels or riding a couple of extra times a week. So removing barriers is a very effective way to springboard yourself forward. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is some of the biggest barriers that may very well be holding you back and how to remove them, so that way you've got an easier time at this sort of thing. Leo's in the house here. Good to see you, my friend. So the first topic, or the first barrier that really holds a lot of people back, and this is also something that is a performance issue as well, and I address this many times over in my books, which is a lack of tension control. Because the bottom line is, if you have trouble controlling the tension and putting the tension in a muscle, your ability to make it bigger and stronger is practically zero. You stand almost no chance whatsoever of being able to condition it to your liking. Because fundamentally, that's all we're working with, is being able to drive tension into our muscles. Everything about your training and your workouts depends on that single solitary thing. Without that, you have nothing at all. No chance. Nothing you do will ever work. No workout, no exercise, no supplements. You will do everything in the world and always come up with nothing to show for it, or at least very little to show for it. So the best way to remove this, of course, is to improve that tension control. And there's a lot of ways you can do this. General strength training can and should be a very good way to improve that tension control, but it doesn't always work. And the reason is because our nervous system has amazing compensatory qualities. If you're doing bicep curls, for example, and your biceps are fairly weak and you don't have a lot of tension control in them, you can still make those curls happen with lots of motion in your back, your hips, using your shoulders, where you're getting the weight up, using the shoulders a whole heck of a lot. And your biceps are relatively not doing much of anything in the exercise. And nothing's going to change until we address that weakness. Here's a little simple test for you. Whenever you're looking at a muscle that you're trying to grow or to make stronger, you should be able to contract it at will with a good amount of force. I'm not talking about during an exercise or when you're using the right position or the right tool or anything. You should just be able to stand there and make your lats or your biceps or your shoulders or your chest or whatever contract very, very hard proactively. So try it every once in a while. And you might be like, well, I can sort of contract it. Like I guess I am. I think I am. Or sometimes people will say, how do I know if I'm working the muscle? If you're asking, you're not, because it should be extremely obvious. It's like getting punched in the face. Not a lot of doubt that it's happened, unless, of course, you get knocked out. However, when we have better tension control, we should feel the muscle contracting very hard. We should feel the tension in it during the exercise or when you are proactively engaging it just standing there. So you might say, well, my calves, that's a common one. Lats, glutes, hamstrings, these are all very common muscles that people have trouble with engaging, partially because we sit so much. And say, well, how do I engage it better? Well, to a large degree, it comes from the practice of just simply trying to engage the muscle more on a habitual basis. I'm talking many, many times all day, every single day. Because if we can engage our muscle better, then that shouldn't be a problem. But if you're telling yourself, well, I kind of sort of maybe feel it engaging a little bit, big red flag. That tells me that your nervous system has trouble engaging those muscles to a high degree. So when it comes to trying to engage it better, that practice helps. I also highly recommend going online and taking a little bit of an anatomy lesson, because the more you can understand the anatomy and the physiology of the muscle, the more you can understand what you're actually trying to use. And if it's kind of this amorphic sort of blob in your mind of, yeah, my chest is kind of sort of there in this general vicinity, then it's very difficult to picture it working. What are the insertion points? What are the origin points of the muscle? What's the pennation of the muscle fibers? What is the cross-sectional direction of if you have different pennations, like in your lats, for example? Some of them run more vertically, some of them more horizontally, and so on. Being able to identify and know the muscle more intimately does wonders for this, because you can literally visualize it in your mind. And if your brain has a better understanding of what it's trying to do, then it's going to do it better, because ultimately it is your nervous system that drives your muscles. It's not your exercise. It's not the workout that you're doing. Your muscles are engaging because your brain tells them to. And if your brain doesn't really know what it's trying to do, well, then you're kind of up creek, because it's not driving the nervous system as it should. I know I'm a kind of a broken record with this, but overcoming isometrics is probably one of the most effective ways to improve that tension control. That's why it's in the warm-ups for grind style calisthenics, because it's a very effective way to improve that tension control. When I first got into overcoming isometrics, I had better tension control in my back within 2 days than I had in the previous 2 years of trying to improve that tension control. So that's a good way to go about it. Having a lighter weight that you're lifting for the exercise, because a lot of times if we're always stuck on using one level of resistance, our nervous system just habitually uses our muscles the same way, especially if it's fairly heavy. So if you go with a lighter weight and you really focus mentally on contracting that muscle well while using that level of resistance, that can be also an effective way to improve that tension control. But the bottom line is you should feel the muscle working. You should be able to engage it at will, even without exercise. And you should definitely feel like it's contracting harder over time, because that's ultimately what strength actually is. Strength training is nothing more than driving more tension into the muscle. And more tension in the muscle gives you a very powerful feedback of, holy smokes, it's contracting a heck of a lot harder. That's definitely what we're after. And the following tips will help you with that. Excuse me as I sip my tea. XY Frederico is coming on. Good to see you, everybody. Sniff Rat. Thank you very much for coming on in, folks. Oh, boy. It is a cold, snowy day here in Denver. This nice hot tea is just what the doctor ordered. It is hitting the money. It feels very, very good. All right. So let's talk about some of the barriers aside from tension control that we have. I addressed this in my previous episode last week that I highly recommend you check out, which is all about recovery. Because when we are training, naturally, we're going to impart some degree of stress and fatigue upon our systems, our physical systems, our mental systems, even our emotional systems. And our ability to progressively train harder over time absolutely requires enough recovery. If you do not have enough adequate recovery, your ability to create the progressive stimulus by training the muscle harder is very, very much an uphill battle. So we need enough recovery. I know the magic question a lot of you may be asking is, so how much recovery do you need? Well, it depends on lots of influences, like anything in fitness, where it depends on how far you're pushing into the red zone or close to failure, how much volume you're using, how much intensity you're using, the exercise you're doing, your level of conditioning, your ability to handle that level of intensity and volume in your environment. So if you were, example, going out and working out at a playground and it's 98 degrees and sunny and feels like it's scorching the surface of the sun, that's going to be a lot more stressful on you, even if you do the same workout. I did a fun workout over at the Philip Morris Park down in Castle Rock here in Colorado. They have a little mini incline and a great calisthenics park out there. By the way, if anybody comes out here to Denver, hit me up. I'll take you to this park. It's like a calisthenics mecca. It's awesome. Well, one day I was driving by and I was like, oh, I'll stop in for a quick little workout. And it just so happened that that day was one of the few overcast kind of cool days we had all summer. Because out here in Denver, the sun and the heat will sap your will to live in 10 minutes. Seriously, I once had lunch with a friend of mine and we walked from her place over to like a little burger joint. And we were like, okay, well, it's just a quick little walk. And then we walked back and we promptly fell asleep on her couch. We were zonked. Just walking for about 15 minutes completely drained us because of the sun and the heat. But when I was working out at Philip S. Morris Park, it was cool and it was overcast. And I worked out for 3 hours like it was nothing. I still had energy left over. They were closing down the park. They had to practically kick me out because the environment was so much easier. I had so much less stress from the exercise. So taking these things into consideration is very important for allowing yourself to have enough recovery. And I also covered in the previous episode how a lot of us have kind of this inverse relationship with recovery. When it comes to you getting the recovery you need, by far the most important thing is sleep. It's not the ice baths and the massage guns and the protein powders and things like that. It's getting really good sleep. The second thing, which I didn't really cover, is just having enough adequate time of recovery. There's a lot of ideas out there of you should recover for 48 hours or you should recover for a full week and stuff. These numbers are just estimated guesses. They're a general template to work off of, but nobody can actually tell you how much recovery you truly need. Only you can figure that out for yourself because you're the one who feels your body, your level of stress, your level of fatigue. Sometimes we can do something every single day and be fine. Other things we need well over a week in order to recover. Like if I ran a marathon, I guarantee you I'm not going to have a good leg workout for at least a week. So we want to make sure that you are giving yourself enough recovery and not being too dogmatic about whatever formula or whatever optimal approach you find out there on the internet. You want to go into your workouts feeling like I've got the very best chance of improving my performance. I can do more reps. I can do more weight. I can have more control. Those are the things that are far more important. And if you need an extra couple of days in order to give yourself that better chance to make that happen, then by all means, give yourself that chance. Give yourself the chance to recover. Because when you give yourself the chance to recover, you give yourself the chance to radically perform at a higher level in your workouts to create the stimulus that is necessary for your ability to build the muscle and strength you need. So make sure you've got adequate recovery. All right, let's get to a couple of questions here, folks. XY is asking a question, if I may, of course. That's why I love to do this. I love to talk to you, folks. If I work night shifts, it definitely makes my recovery longer. Should I change workout count or decrease the intensity? You could do either. Generally go along with whatever feels best for you or what you are hedging towards. I would say more of volume though than intensity. So if you're trying to build strength, especially, you still need that intensity high, but the volume is going to be more of an influence towards the amount of stress and recovery you need. So if you're usually doing, say, 8 sets for a muscle group, then chop it down to 6 or 4 and see if that helps. Because as I mentioned in the previous episode, one of the best recovery strategies out there is to not do so much work that requires the recovery in the first place. Because if you have a clear objective of what you're trying to accomplish in your workouts and you do enough work, but not too much, then you don't need nearly as much recovery. And that's a hell of a lot of a smarter approach than working yourself to death every single workout and then trying to find some way to recover. But yeah, there are going to be challenges. There are going to be barriers in your training, like what we have here. Like I work nights. It's kind of not my optimal circadian rhythm kind of thing. Yeah, sure. That's kind of a mark against your ability to do this as well as possible, potentially. Who knows? You may be a night owl. But if that's the case, then you have to kind of just work around it. Nobody has an optimal life for this stuff. Nobody has an optimal workout or optimal diet. There's always something that's going to be less than stellar, and that's perfectly fine. There are 1,000 variables that come into play for your results. If several of them are not as good as they could be, that's okay. You do what you can with what you have and make things a lot better however you can. All right. So we have lack of recovery. Now, let's get more onto the nuts and bolts of the fundamentals of what we're trying to accomplish in our workout. A lot of times people get lost in the weeds when it comes to their training. Should I do these many sets? Should I do this split training? Should I do this exercise? Or what about this? Or I've heard machines are not as good, but this other guy's jacked and he uses machines all the time. A lot of this stuff is just noise that doesn't really matter a whole heck of a lot. Because at the end of the day, what really matters is how much you influence things on the fundamental level. The fundamental level is the rock bottom approach level, sorry to keep using the word over and over, that is truly responsible for your results. And most of the details we get lost in, especially with a lot of paralysis by analysis, are more of the superficial details that honestly don't really matter all that much. I know it seems like everything matters, that everything is super important, especially when you've got a lot of influencers out there saying, oh, you've got to do this, so it's going to kill your gains and stuff. But the fact is, your muscles only have two variables you need to grow over time. And you can literally do anything you want. You can do whatever exercises you want. You can do whatever workout programs you like. You can do whatever type of training styles you want. Doesn't really matter that much. You only need to progress and enhance these two variables. And the first of which, of course, is tension, which we've been talking about already. You've got to get more tension in the muscles over time. There's just no two ways about it. If you do not have more tension in the muscle, it is impossible to get stronger, because that's what strength is putting more tension in the muscles. Of course, that starts with tension control to begin with and having adequate recovery so that you can contract the muscles well. But you have the amount of tension in the muscle, and then, of course, you have time. And time is just how long is it there for? Usually quantified in sets and reps, but it could also be regular time, like if you're holding a position for amount of time. And you could also have frequency, or how much you're doing the exercise over a week. So I train legs twice a week versus once a week, and so on. But don't always mistake more volume and time for progress, because you could very conceivably use compensation to have that extra volume. Someone who does a whole lot of volume in their training, I'm immediately suspect in saying, you're not working with a lot of intensity then, are you? It could be. They could be Captain America, but chances are no. Chances are not really. If someone says that they do 1,000 pull-ups a day or something, I want to see those pull-ups. I want to see what we're working with, because you're probably compromising intensity. So that's why I usually prioritize intensity and then have the volume as a bit of an afterthought with that sort of thing, because I want to build strength first and foremost, and then the volume is just whatever volume I need in order to just kind of finish off the muscle later on, like I have in my push-pull squat workout program that I just released last month. But ultimately, that's it. Do the work however you like. When we're looking at our training, I get the question a lot of times of, how do I know if my workout's effective? How do I know if what I'm doing is right? And the answer is, don't look for a single sign. And to that, a lot of times I would ask them, like, what are you looking for to tell you that the workout was right or effective? What sign from the heavens are you looking for? What type of signal from your body are you trying to achieve that says, okay, now this workout was effective? Because if you don't know what that sign is, you just endlessly work and work and work and work and work, and you don't know what you're doing. And a lot of times people get lost in false flags or signs. It's like, well, if I push to failure, that's a sign that it's effective. Not necessarily. I just put out a video the other day of why always just going to failure isn't a smart way to build muscle and strength. Or some people say, well, once my muscles are really burning, or if they're sore, or if I'm working up a good sweat, whatever the case may be, we're looking for some sort of a sign. But most of these signs are more of a heavy correlation to an effective workout rather than an actual causation. And so when we get lost in a false flag, then we end up sacrificing the actual effectiveness of the workout in order to satisfy that one metric or one signal in order to hit that. And then we think, great, my workout was effective, when in fact you didn't really move the needle much at all in any way, shape, or form. So how do you know if your workout was effective? Simple. Time and tension are increasing. You're striving for more. You have more tension in the muscle over time. You have potentially more time, or you're just simply creating a good degree of fatigue, or you're doing more repetitions with a given level of resistance, which is not exactly an amount of tension, but it is heavily correlated. You're looking for that progression. You're looking for that objective from your training. You're trying to accomplish something. And if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, then you're never going to know if the workout was effective. And you fall victim to the false signs, the false flags. But once you know what that objective is, either I'm just trying to burn fat and calories, which is the easiest objective, I'm trying to improve and increase time under tension for building muscle and strength, or I'm trying to improve my performance, in which case I'm trying to do the thing better somehow. Those are your objectives. Your workout is effective if you can achieve, or the degree you achieve, those objectives. It's not because you follow a certain program or workout routine. It's not because your workout is an hour long or you get a burn in the muscles or anything like that. It's because you achieve those fundamental objectives. That's what makes your workout effective. When it comes to building muscle and strength, time and tension, my friends. It's all just time and tension. However you can increase those things, do it. And whenever you're looking at various variables, like what if I did this exercise? Or what if I change this in my program and stuff? All you've got to do is contemplate, how is that going to influence time and tension? That's all you need, and the answer will be obvious. Chances are it's not going to do much of anything. It's just a little bit different changes. It's like, yeah, it's going to make things different, but I don't think it's really going to do anything as far as moving the needle. It's like, okay, there you go. It's different, but not necessarily better. But if you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely going to potentially put a lot more tension in the muscle, or force me to really have the muscle work to a higher degree of fatigue, well, there you go. Rock and roll, my friend. It should be a pretty simple and obvious path forward into what you're trying to accomplish. All right. Let's see what else I can help folks with. Chris is coming in. Matt, I've been doing isometrics, yielding and overcoming since having COVID in the summer, and I've added nearly an inch to my arms with no dynamic work. Not surprised. Do you know anyone who only does isometrics? I don't personally, but I do know they're out there. I do know there are some folks who do only isometrics. And if you do a YouTube search for overcoming isometrics, or Dragon Door ISO chain, which of course is the tool of choice for overcoming isometrics, then you may find such individuals and be able to confer with them. And I know there's one guy out there, I've heard of him, blanking on the name though, so I'm afraid I can't refer, but they are out there. If you check it out, then it will be something to look for. Or anybody who's listening, write in the comments if you primarily use overcoming isometrics or isometric training to build muscle and strength. Talk to my good friend Chris here and exchange information and get in touch with everybody. Okay, let's talk more about these limitations that may be holding you back. Diet is another thing. I was discussing this with a client this morning, and he was saying, well, how do I know if diet is holding me back? Well, that's another good question, because sometimes, a lot of times, diet isn't holding you back. Yes, you want to eat enough to support your training and your recovery, for sure. However, a lot of us probably already have more than adequate diets when it comes to this sort of thing. If you're getting 3 good square meals a day, you're eating to a good degree of satisfaction, you're not fighting hunger and cravings, your food selection is good, chances are your diet's pretty good on its own right there. You will find examples of people who say, oh man, I started eating a lot more, it made such a difference. I made such better gains. Usually, these individuals are not the type who already have a really good, solid, consistent diet to begin with. They're usually the folks like my old roommate in college who literally would go days without eating and he would live off of Arizona iced teas. He's like, oh man, I love these iced teas. This is all I consume now. I'm like, you don't eat anything? He's like, no, I pretty much just drink sugar water, and he'll have like a dinner once or twice a week or something. Wasn't in the best of health, but I bet if he started to work out and train, and then he started actually eating good, copious amounts of real food, he would have a big difference from his diet. Not because his diet improved, it's because his diet no longer sucked. So, yes, the diet can certainly help if you have a bad diet to begin with. However, if you're already eating a good amount of food, if you're eating to good satiety, you're getting several meals in a day, you're getting protein at each meal, chances are trying to make headway in your diet isn't going to make that much difference. But don't take my word for it. I'm always telling people, by all means, go get the protein powders, go get the shakes, go get meal replacements, all these sorts of things. Give it a shot, see what happens. But always remember that fundamentally, supplements don't do anything different than food, because that's why they're supplements. They still supply the same nutrients, they're supplying calories. They're just kind of a processed, more convenient way to go about doing it, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not against that at all. But I think sometimes when people are trying to eat differently in order to build muscle, they feel like they're doing something special. Like, oh, I've got this protein powder, I've got this diet that's going to make something unique happen. That's not how anything in fitness works. Nothing in fitness works because we do something special or different. It's because you're taking those fundamental processes that are already happening and the habits you're already engaging in and simply speeding up or slowing down the things that are already happening. So in the case of building muscle, you have protein synthesis and, of course, a catabolic effect of breaking down protein in your muscles, both of which are constantly happening every single day of your life. So all you're doing, if you eat a little more or you start working out and you speed up that protein synthesis, you're just speeding up the thing that's already happening. There's nothing unique or special that is happening that you need to start or stop doing. Here's another barrier that we can work with is inevitably the people who have the hardest time achieving almost anything, especially in fitness, and especially when it comes to muscle and strength, are those who try to hack things a lot. Remember, you can't hack Mother Nature. She's the one who's actually in charge of results, not you, not your workout, not your diet, not your program. It's the processes of Mother and human nature. You're just influencing them with your diet and your workout and so on. But nevertheless, there's a lot of ideas out there that's very enticing, that there's some sort of a secret formula out there, that there's some sort of a way that you can trick the body into making something happen. And yeah, sure, there's ways that we can move the needle a little faster, like improving tension control or having a better diet, but you're not hacking anything. You're just simply moving more in alignment with the fundamental processes of Mother and human nature. However, when people are usually hacking things, they inevitably fall into trying to get too many of those superficial things in alignment. Like, okay, so what if I did legs on Tuesday and then back on Wednesday? But hold on, wait, if I did back on Wednesday, what if I did it every other Wednesday and then Tuesday? And then on the Lunar New Year, I flipped it around, but then I would be also in Mercury's in retrograde, and I've got pea protein before 9:26 a.m. And it's all just overthinking. It's a lot of paralysis by analysis. It gives us the illusion of doing something, the illusion of control, that we're making something happen, but fundamentally nothing's different. You're not changing anything on the fundamental level. So you can change your diet and your workout and you're programming and 100 other variables 7 ways from here till Sunday and not really do anything at all because you're not actually influencing that deeper fundamental level. That's what's really important. So don't get caught up in a lot of the details. On top of that, there's a lot of advice out there that's based on more of a mechanistic approach to things. It's all about like optimizing this hormone or getting this enzyme to go up, or at this time of the day, your testosterone level is higher and your cortisol is lower. So if you have this type of food and then you do this type of exercise, but it's got to be before 9 a.m. But then again, with daylight savings time and you've got more sunlight at this time, so you've got to adjust accordingly and stuff. Most of this stuff is just, nah. It sounds like it does something. I know it sounds like it does something, because if someone says you do this exercise, you're going to spike your testosterone, or if you eat this food, you're going to spike or decrease your insulin, and all these sorts of things. These mechanistic ideas are all based on, if you do X, this little thing happens in the body. It spikes this or drops this or makes this happen. But remember that these mechanistic things are usually too acute to really matter in the long run. It's like when people tell me all the time, you're going to spike your insulin levels and store fat. So what? I don't care. Does that mean I'm going to get fatter? Absolutely not. Because it's always the 30,000-foot view that's responsible. I don't care if I store fat. I don't care if I've got catabolic processes going on in my body. I don't care if I have protein synthesis happening. Having that happen for 15 minutes after a workout, a little tiny bit more, will that matter? Probably not, because it's too small of an influence to really make any single difference. What we want to do is think of what's the total effect over the course of a week, a month, a year. That's what matters. What is this doing to that fundamental process? The little mechanistic things, it's usually a lot of work for not really much influence. It doesn't really matter very much. So don't get lost too much in that sort of thing. And 9 times out of 10, a lot of those mechanistic methods are things you should probably do anyway. Things like, if you eat these types of foods, then you're going to have more stable blood sugar. It's like, you mean fruits and vegetables? Drinking water, not eating too much junk food? Yeah, I know. I already do that. I don't need another person telling me not to get blackout drunk every night because it's going to inhibit my gains. I already know I shouldn't be doing that because it's not good for me in general. So the general health stuff is usually pretty in alignment with this stuff anyway. So you just don't need to have a lot of the details dialed in. Hold that thought just one more moment, though, because sometimes the details do matter, but only in certain circumstances. Matthew Lewis coming on. It's good to see you, my friend. Hey, Matt, I feel like my shoulder stability is holding my push-up progression back. Probably, yeah. Holds a lot of people back. When I push intensity with more single arm focus, my form suffers. Any advice appreciated? Thanks. Very good. So this is a little bit in alignment with what I was talking about earlier, where there's a level of intensity that we can bring upon our body that it just kind of breaks down and our body just kind of goes on autopilot. It's a similar thing in like in bike racing. I know I've got the bike racing analogies where I would have someone come up behind me and I'd be like, oh no, they're going to pass me. And I'd push even harder and I would take the wrong line. I'd slip my gears. I would be overexhausted. I wouldn't be breathing right. And I'd start going slower and they would pass me because I was trying to push too much at that higher level. But then they would pass me and I'd be like, oh, well, okay, they passed me. And I'd relax just a little bit. My breathing would get better. I'd start taking better lines and inevitably I'd catch back up to him. It's like, how the hell did this guy just pass me? Like, come on, go. He's going so slow. And sometimes that would be a back and forth situation throughout the race, which was always a lot of fun. And then it'd be a sprint to the end, which was something I usually would win, not to brag, but I was a hell of a sprinter on the mountain bike. I can't climb for crap, but I can sprint like a mother. But anyway, you're probably exploring exercises that are just a little bit outside of your range of proficiency. So I would recommend regressing just a little bit, using more of a archer style where you have one arm assisted, or maybe like negatives and then you catch yourself, or something, go with a slightly easier progression, focusing on that form and technique. And then some days you're going to feel like I'm really on top of it now. I'm going to try this single arm push-ups again and go for it. But the bottom line is you want to have a level of intensity that you can control and not feel like you're struggling with it. I tell my clients all the time, no struggle reps. I don't want struggle reps. I want controlled reps. I want challenged reps. But if you're struggling, we got to back off a little bit. I don't care if you can do it. There's a billion episodes out there of people on the internet doing one-arm push-ups and pull-ups and things like that, but they're clearly struggling through it. It's fun as a test, but that's not going to be an effective training method. Challenge yourself, but don't struggle. If you're struggling, it's going to be quite a bit more of an uphill battle because you're actually building and reinforcing bad habits. Dan is coming in with a good question. Matt, do you stretch after micro workouts? Not really. And the reason is simple, is because I kind of just already do, I guess you could call it micro mobility training. This is what a lot of the exercises in Al Cavadlo's new ebook, Mobility Man, lend themselves to, where there's basic exercises that you can do on a regular basis, just kind of stretching as if you were waking up in the morning. And a lot of them don't require any sort of special preparation or anything. You just do it a little bit. This one here has totally changed my life, where I'm just reaching up and elevating my shoulder blades. I'll do a little side to side, back and forth. There we go. So literally just that a couple times a day has been the bulk of my mobility training. It makes a hell of a difference. Same thing with big range of motion strength exercises, because some of the best mobility training you can do is strength exercises that require a big range of motion, like deep lunges, deep squats, bridges, leg raises, where you're really stretching out your lower back, like the Trinity in Convict Conditioning 2. These things I really do believe are some of the best ways to improve mobility, not just because they're super efficient, because you're kind of killing two birds with one stone, but because they're teaching your nervous system to have strength in those positions, active range of motion rather than passive, as it were. And my experience has certainly been that's a lot more effective for mobility than just the passive stretching, speaking as someone who's largely been chronically tight my entire life. Let's see what else we got here. Old Darren coming in. Hey, Matt, I have read conflicting information regarding tendon recovery with regards to isometrics and straight arm biceps band pulls. Are they easier on the joints or not? So here's the big lesson about tendons and joints, my friends, is that when our muscles are working as they should, we have that tension control. When we have good alignment with the exercise, the stress on our joints should be minimal. The stress should not be very high. Stress on our joints and the associated tissues is usually a sign that something is wrong, that we're doing something wrong. And you hear this all the time in the exercise field. Lunges are bad for the knees. Sissy squats are bad for the knees. Dips are bad for the shoulders. Handstands and push-ups, bad for the wrists, all those sorts of things. And I used to believe that stuff as well, because dips hurt my shoulders, lunges hurt my knees, push-ups hurt my wrists, pull-ups hurt my elbows, and so on. However, once I understood what I was doing wrong with those techniques, lunges cured my knees, dips cured my shoulders, push-ups cured my wrists. In other words, the exercise that was, quote, causing the issue, it wasn't causing the issue. It was exposing the issue. And so when we do an exercise and we're like, oh man, my joints and stuff, that should be a sign we're doing something wrong. We're messing something up. Now, one of the big mistakes that a lot of people make with this sort of thing, where they do have a lot of those injuries, is because, again, they're too focused on just working themselves to death. They're trying to get too much practice in. They're getting too much volume in, because inevitably you do enough of any type of training, it's going to turn to crap. It's going to be bad form. You're going to have bad tension control and joint support of anything if you just do it enough. So that's, again, why we want to have a very objective-based approach to our training. If you have a straight arm strength exercise and you're like, I'm going to practice this, don't go into it saying, I've got to practice this for 10 minutes or I've got to hold it for 3 minutes or do 100 reps or anything like that. Because when you base your workouts on how much work you do, you're crossing your fingers and hoping it's an effective workout by luck. You're hoping it's going to be effective by chance. I don't like to play that game. I don't gamble personally. I don't find much excitement in going to Vegas and gambling and stuff. I'd rather make money through work because it's a much more sure thing. I don't want to put down $20 on a blackjack table and think, what is there to stop me from losing that? Not much. Yeah, I could win $50, but that's a chance. I don't want to live by chance as much as possible. Of course, there's always some degree of luck, but I want things to be much more in my control. So when you have an objective-based approach of, I'm trying to get better at this straight arm exercise, practice it for sure, but only practice it to the point you can do it as well as possible or to a high degree of proficiency. The second you feel like, okay, I'm losing the support in my back, I'm losing the support in my shoulders, or I'm really starting to just feel it in that joint or whatever, you're done. You are done right there. It doesn't matter if there was a program that said you still need to do 5 more reps or whatever, you're done. Because doing more work is not going to be beneficial. Our training is all about programming our body to perform at a higher level. And if you can't do that, there's no point whatsoever in doing more work. 0 point in doing more work, unless there's some sort of a challenge that you have to get through or something. But we are there to train our bodies, not work our bodies. The work just comes naturally. Of course, you're going to work your body, but the work is not the goal. The information coming into your body is. So just to put a little bit of a ribbon on it, do whatever you want in your training. Do whatever is in alignment with your goals and your preferences. If someone says that's going to be bad for you, ignore them. Understand instead, why could it be bad? What's the technique or the erosion that could cause that thing to happen? And then avoid that. But usually when someone says, if you do this, it's going to be bad for you, that's because they don't understand the potential downside and how to avoid it. They're just saying, just avoid the exercise outright, which I think is sad because you're throwing the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. Mariano, it's good to see you. He's asking, apart from strength training, what sports do you think contribute the most to quality of life? Oh boy, is that a good one. Well, I will give you several with different qualities that will improve your quality of life. First, anything that gets you outside. As my favorite comic strip, Calvin and Hobbes, he once noted, the world isn't such a bad place if you can just manage to get out into it. There are a lot of psychological, emotional, and even physiological benefits with just spending more time outside. So I would say have at least one activity that gets you outdoors, walking, hiking, cycling, rollerblading, doing calisthenics at a park, take a couple kettlebells in your backyard, even if it's just something on your front porch, like doing a yoga routine on your patio, get outside. That's probably one of the best things you can do for your quality of life. The second is have an activity that moves you in a wide variety of ways outside of just the normal push, pull, squat type of stuff of strength training. So my classic example is martial arts. With martial arts, we're doing all kinds of different movements that aren't so machine robotic type of activities. And this stuff contributes to fortifying the body in ways that we're just not going to get from mechanistic, robotic strength training methods. So martial arts, dancing is also very good. Anything that can be very social too, especially this day and age. We've got social media, but we're becoming more isolated and people are becoming more lonely than ever because we spend so much of our social time with a screen instead of in front of real people. So martial arts can do that, of course, but get something where it's social, where you're meeting people, you're forming new friendships, you're having more of a connection with people. Dancing can be very good for that. Any kind of classes, yoga, parkour, qigong, rock climbing, things like that. Get you outside of the classic robotic methods of cardio and strength training. Those are the things I think that'll have the biggest impact on your quality of life. Is something along those lines. Get you moving in different ways, get it social, and get outside. Bonus points if you find things that could do all three at the same time. That's a great question. That is fantastic. You always come up with good ones, Mariano. Thank you. Jackie Waukee with the jacked up Garfield. Good to see you as always. Hey, Matt, since I fully recovered from a knee injury, glad to hear it, I find that MMC with my left glutes much weaker. Absolutely. In shrimp squats, tension goes to the knee. Yes, very common. How would you address this imbalance? Love the fits. Very good. Mind muscle connection, particularly in the glute, the minor glutes, the medius and the minimus, and especially when you do those shrimp squats, because you're placing all your weight on one leg, you've got a little bit of weight behind you. There's probably a little bit of rotation in your pelvis, and you're not allowing that lateral hip and your glute med to handle the load. And like I said earlier, if you have pain in a joint, that usually means a muscle somewhere isn't doing its job. And a very common one with the legs is pain in the knee is a sign your hips aren't quite doing their job. So again, I would recommend using a regressed technique, possibly like a lunge, like a walking lunge or something. One of the cues I also give people with single leg stuff to get that hip working a little bit more is feel like you're kind of sitting laterally into your pocket, like you're kind of bumping your hip a little bit outwards, just a little bit to press into that hip. Another thing you can do is when you're standing at the top, contract that glute med, particularly glute med, but the ones in the side of your hip, engage them as hard as you can, and then try to maintain that engagement as you're squatting down. If you have trouble with that, use an easier exercise, like the lunges. You have trouble with that, easier exercise again, like squats. Trouble with that, sit in a chair. Use an easier exercise until you can get that engagement through the range of motion. Because remember, people often have more difficulty engaging and maintaining tension in a muscle when it's in an elongated position. And this very much goes for the hips, for the lower body, where people will stand and they're like, yeah, hips are on, engaged, and then it just totally turns off as they fall into the squat. So use the lighter exercises for practice for that. And if you have trouble engaging those muscles, use my favorite overcoming isometric, which is just standing with your feet slightly turned out and you pry them apart like you're trying to pull the floor apart with your feet. Your hips are fully engaged or extended, so they're forward. You should feel those lateral hip muscles working really good. Practice that daily, because that's what usually happens with an injury is our nervous system shuts down tension to muscles as a protective measure. But then once the injury is healed, our nervous system has trouble reconnecting things and getting things back online. So it takes a little bit of time to make sure that's happening. Homework. That's an interesting, I have a name right there, but it's sufficient nonetheless. Asking, I do dips and shoulder presses and there's clicking with no pain. Should I keep going or ignore it to a degree? I have hypermobility. So this is another example, my friends, of tension control being inadequate, that we're not supporting our joints. So it's not bad enough that there's pain. And the usual consensus out there is pain as crunching and things like that is perfectly fine. As long as there's no pain, you're okay. However, now I've understood that when we have clicking, that is a sign that there's not as much support as there could be. So if it gets worse, there will be problems down the road. Think of that clicking as the canary in the coal mine. So usually what it comes down to with those two moves is a lack of supportive tension in your lats, in your back. And I recommend practicing where you're on the dip bars and you have, let me see if I can't show you, scapular dips. Practice your scapular dips and you should feel your lats lighting up very, very hard, especially when you're pushing down. You also want to squeeze your muscles together. And if you can get your lats to engage more, it's probably going to be much more supportive of your shoulders, especially in the dips, but also in the overhead press. You'll notice the improvement on the dips first, probably, because trying to keep your lats engaged on an overhead press can be a bit more tricky. It's just more coordination. But that's where I would look at that sort of thing. Also, overhead press, I'm assuming you're talking with a barbell. Try it with dumbbells. You have a rotation like the Arnolds with the dumbbells. I almost always give overhead presses to clients with dumbbells or kettlebells. I almost never do it with a barbell. You just get so much more when you have the rotation, you got stability going on, and it's a little bit more engaging and stuff. I just find the barbell is fine, but a lot of people don't have the mobility and stability to do it as safely as possible, and they're just not going to get as much out of it. So I would go with hand weights if I were you. All right, a couple more questions are coming in fast and furious here. Joseph Bello, hey Matt, I'm martial artist in Tiger Crane Kung Fu, do 30 or 40-minute workouts 3 days a week, 12, 13. I think you sent me an email, Joseph, and I haven't gotten back to you. But anyway, we'll address it here. My back squats, lunges, is that enough to build muscle? So my friends, always remember that when it comes down to the questions like this, where it's like, is this enough? Is this going to work? The answer is always in, what is the delta that you are creating? That's the delta in Red Delta Project. You do not get results because of your routine. You do not get results because of how hard you work. You do not get results because of the exercises you do. You get results by creating a delta on the fundamental level of the physiological processes. In other words, I was using my legs to this level of performance, of strength and endurance. And now, over time, I've gone to this level. And that's more resistance, that's more repetitions, it's more tension in the muscles, it's better technique, whatever the case may be. That's what makes it effective. I honestly don't care what your routine is. You just get the work in. 90% of what makes a routine effective is just what can you stick with? What can you do on a regular basis? There's a lot of stuff out there on the internet telling you this is the formula for success. There is no formula for success. The formula for success is whatever you can do to get the work in. Because if you get the work in on a consistent basis, that gives you the opportunity to create that progressive delta over time. I don't care if you work your legs every day or once a week. I don't care if you're on a leg press or if you're doing shrimp squats. I don't care if you're doing high volume or low volume training. What's most important is you look at your performance and say, I used to do it this way, and now I'm doing it to this higher level. Same thing in your Kung Fu. You don't have a optimal routine in martial arts. Every time you're practicing, you are focusing on trying to connect your body, to get energy to flow through your body in a dynamic way. You've done techniques. I know you've done this where you have something in and you're like, oh, that connected well. Like, oh, there's power there. Oh, that, and there's also times when you do a kick and you're like, oh, okay, that was sloppy and kind of messy. You know when things are getting better. Your goal is to improve your performance in your Kung Fu. It's the same thing in your calisthenics. That's what gets results. Now, as I alluded to earlier, sometimes the details matter. Sometimes working out twice a week versus once a week will matter, or volume is different, or what exercises. But why does it matter? No, it's not the science behind it or what research says. It's because you have more alignment with your personal preferences and resources. So you could have, for example, in your martial arts, I could say, great, do 1,000 squats every day. And you could do that. And you're like, but my legs are dead at the end of the week, and that my kicks are suffering and my stance work isn't so good. Now, I could tell you a million reasons why 1,000 squats a day is going to be good for you. But if you're there struggling to hold a horse stance and it's like, oh, this is not working for me, it's a bad way to go. But if you say, if I do my leg work on Sunday, because that gives me enough rest in between my Kung Fu training and stuff, and I can recover. And if I do my regular lunges, because that really feels good, like I'm getting good activation in the quads, I think I can work my legs to a higher level that way. Bang, there's your answer. That's why that stuff works, is because the details put you personally in better alignment with your training to create those deltas. It's not some formula. I think a lot of people look at us trainers and we think we've got some sort of book in the back, a magic tome, and it's like, according to the research, 5 sets is optimal for building muscle. Amen. No, a lot of times when I'm working with people, it's just like, so when can you work out? Tuesday's good? No, Tuesdays I've got a 5K I run. Okay. How about Thursday then? It usually takes a little more time to recover. Oh, Friday? Yeah, Friday's good. Okay, then you do your legs on Friday. I'm not basing it on any sort of like metadata analysis research from upper level universities or anything. It's just, when can you do it? When do you like to do it? What kind of exercise do you like to do? That's what a lot of workouts are actually based off of, is just helping people achieve a better personal alignment with their goals and preferences and resources. And whatever's going to give you the best chance of creating that progressive delta over time, that's the way to go, my friends. Just do literally whatever else you want to do, however you want to do it. Give yourself that freedom. You don't have to do it a certain way. Justino, it's good to see you again. Oh, Matt, do you recommend using band assist for overweight people on pull-ups and dips? You can. Usually for people who are overweight, I try to use, if you have it, the weighted assistance machines at a gym. If you have one where it's got like a platform you can kneel or stand on, that generally provides more stability to handle and control your body weight for those exercises. It's a little bit more reliable. Of course, it depends on your body size and your actual weight and stuff, but typically I err to that instead of bands for trying to get those motions. But even more so, I would say I don't even bother with those exercises. I would stick to your basic push-up progressions and row progressions, because fundamentally they're still push and pull. They're working the same muscles. They've got the same motions generally as pull-ups and dips. So you're not really doing anything that different. And typically people who are either overweight or less experienced with calisthenics, they're going to just feel more comfortable with horizontal push and pull. They're going to have more control. It builds more total body control by supporting themselves with the flexion and extension chain during those exercises. It's really easy to just set up with a simple set of rings or suspension straps. So it's also an exercise that people can do at home if they just buy a simple set of NOS suspension setup or something along those lines. It's just more accessible. It's easier to adjust. You don't need to bother with the bands and other things and getting all set up. I usually just focus on the push and pull on the horizontal plane. You're probably going to get more out of it that way, and it's just a lot easier to adjust and make faster progress in. That's the way I would approach it. There's nothing special about pull-ups and dips. They're just simple push and pull. It's just your body weight. But when you're trying to use much less of your body weight, it's kind of like, what's the point then? It's like, quick little story. A trainer one time came to me and they're like, dude, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in the gym. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, look. And this is totally unprofessional. I chastised him afterwards. I was like, you're an idiot if you're chastising the members at this gym. But anyway, he was like, look, they're using the assisted pull-up machine, which, yeah, they had like 50 pounds of assistance, and they were using a dip belt at the same time to add 30 pounds of resistance. And he's like, it's just here and then here. You're just adding and then subtracting at the same time. But the fact is, we all do that anyway. When we're doing pull-ups with bands, you're using a heavier exercise and taking resistance off of it. It's the same exact thing. So that's why I would go with the rows instead of just using easier exercise. So you're not adding and subtracting at the same time. Just go with an appropriate level with a different exercise. Long-winded answer, but I felt it needed to be said. Homework's going again. I'm doing dumbbells now. Okay, good. Dumbbell overhead press. It's really good with one side too for the lats. My lats are weak. Absolutely. So that definitely tells me we're on the right track for the whole lat activation. Get it turned on, get it engaged. And funny enough, this exercise I was showing you earlier, the stretch up, that's actually a pretty good way to improve your lat activation because it helps to stretch out the lats. And if we're stretching and we can improve the tension control, that could be helpful. All right. Let's see. A couple more here real quick before I sign on off. Is Sim, hey Matt, I do to 60 minutes daily exercise with some HIIT including. Very good. I don't see the point to be longer as recovery will be compromised. Will take longer. Absolutely. So remember, folks, your workouts are not effective because of how long they are. Wish I knew that back in the day because I mentally got stuck on that idea that a workout had to be 60 minutes in order to be effective. And this was back when I bought myself a punching bag to practice Taekwondo at home. And for some stupid reason, I thought I have to work out on this punching bag for an entire hour in order to make it effective. Well, anybody who's done bag work knows that an hour's worth of bag work is just crazy. It's insane. I think I did it 2 or 3 times and it just totally drained me. And it was very hard to motivate myself for. And it was not fun at all, which is why I barely ever used it. If I knew then what I know now, it's like, just go down and set a timer for 2 minutes and hit it with some side kicks. That's all you need to do. It doesn't need to be a very long thing. Instead, if I was like, I'm trying to improve the trajectory of my side kick, I'm trying to improve how well I can chamber my side kick against the bag. Oh man, that would have made my side kick a hell of a lot better in like 3 minutes. Just go downstairs. I'm doing laundry or something, put in the laundry and walking by. I'm like, sure, I'll get some kicks on the bag here. Why not? Kind of thing. It's all about those training objectives, burning calories, time and attention, or performance. And you just do however much work you can or are willing to do to achieve those objectives. If it takes you 30 minutes, great. If it takes you 5 hours, like if you're running a marathon or climbing a mountain, then it's going to take you 5 hours. But don't base your workouts on how much work you do. Base it on achieving that fundamental objective. That's what makes it effective. That's how much work you should do. And it's going to change and adjust on a case-by-case basis. All right. And gamer Christina, it's good to see you, Christina. I have a 30-pound cat. Holy hell. That's crazy, man. My cats are heavy, but they're not that heavy. I hold him while I goblet squat. If I do my squats in good form, he allows it. Otherwise, he demands to be let go if I wobble. I love that. That's awesome. When I studied abroad in Japan, I did the same thing with the children of my host family. They had a 3 and 5-year-old, and I would have them like on my shoulders and stuff, and we would work out together. They loved it. It was great. But kudos to your cat. Holy smokes. Is that like a Bengal or a Maine Coon? That is a big cat. Must be one hell of a lap cat. But I love this type of ideas. No joke, years back in the Fit Rebel days, I actually had a guy email me one time. And he's like, I can't get in shape. I don't have a gym. And I was like, well, where are you? Like, what do you do? He's like, I'm a goat farmer in Pakistan. And I wrote back, I'm like, well, how heavy are your goats? It's like, they're weight. Put them in a cart, carry them around kind of thing. And he was like, oh, I don't know. That's kind of a silly idea. I'm like, dude, weight is weight. It doesn't really matter that much. Use your resources. I love the creativity there, Christina. Awesome. Zarate Karate, good to see you as always, saying congrats on the 120K subs. Thank you very much, my friend. I got one of them YouTube play buttons for crossing the 100,000 barrier. Of course, you get that when you get 100,000 subscribers, you can get a plaque from YouTube that says, hey, you got over 100,000 and stuff. And I sent it to my good friend, Nikki, who back in the day, some of you may know Nikki by name, but Nikki is kind of one of the supportive backbones for the Red Delta Project. Back when it was getting off the ground, she was actually kind of, putting food on the table when I wasn't making any money. And she was encouraging me on some dark nights. She was like, you got to keep going kind of thing. So when they're like, hey, here's your play button, I'm like, good, send it to Nikki. Because that's a tradition I have. Whenever I win medals and trophies and things like that, I always give it to those who have supported me because I wouldn't be there without them. When I won some medals in Taekwondo this past year, I gave them to my good friends and my massage therapists and my physical therapists and stuff. I'm like, guys, I would not be performing like this if it wasn't for you. So I give you my medals and stuff. It's a tradition that I have. I don't know why I'm talking about that. I guess I'm just bragging, humble bragging, I guess. Dan, I was like, hey, man, we know that Dragon Door got the idea for the Isomax from you. Not true. Come on, admit it. So here's the story. So of course, with the ISO chain, I had a video that I put out where I made it instead of a chain, it's with a strap. It's a cam buckle strap, much easier to adjust, much more versatile, better in every way, in my humble opinion, because that's what I do. Like every time I get a piece of equipment, I look at how I can make it better. Even my Bodyweight Master here, I've made several modifications to this bad boy, even though you would never see it because they're invisible. But I sent Dragon Door and Paul Wade the video of that, going like, I don't know if I'm kicking the hornet's nest with this one, but who knows? And this was a couple of years ago. And even then, Paul Wade wrote back and he's like, yep, this is a good idea. We're on the same page. We're already working on it. And it's called the Isomax. So it was a couple of years or a year or so. I can't remember when I started doing this, but when they finally came out with the IsoMax, which yes, I did pre-order, and they're like, hey, they finally released it. Fantastic. He wasn't lying. He wasn't, because I almost wrote him and I was like, you guys mentioned this IsoMax thing you're kind of working on. Are you still doing that or no, kind of thing? But when it came out, I was like, oh, hell yes. And I dare say, I think their design is a hell of a lot better than mine too, because they got the daisy chain version. They've got the better platform with it. Mine is a modification of the original ISO chain, but I think their IsoMax is just, I think it's going to be right on the money. I think it's just going to be awesome. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And Gamer Christine is coming back in. Yes, weight is weight. My cat encourages proper form. I don't know his breed, but his exact weight is 32 pounds. Wow. Holy smokes. That is a tiger. Are you sure you don't have a lion in your living room? That's what I would look into. Look into the 23andMe for cats and see if they've got some Sahara DNA in the beast there. Zarate Zain, any advice on correcting muscle imbalances on the legs? I recently did 200 bodyweight squats, and it's odd that my right leg is more sore than my left. Why is that? Oh, it could be many things, my friend. So one of the things that causes muscle soreness that is unusual, but people don't usually address, is just improving that tension control. I had a client the other day come in and she was like, oh my gosh, my hamstrings are just cranking today. They're so stiff. They're so sore. I'm looking through her program going, why? We didn't do anything that was unusual, because a lot of times muscle soreness is not the sign of something of higher level of intensity. It's just the fact that you did something different. And I'm looking, I'm like, we didn't do anything different. Nothing changed. But I realized that what had happened is her mind muscle connection or tension control suddenly jumped up, and she's putting a lot more tension in the muscles. So even though she has the same type of training, not much different as far as the exercise of the program going, but she's getting more tension in the muscle. So her muscles are responding as if she just greatly added a lot more resistance. That might be the case for you. If you did 200 reps and it's like, that's normal sort of thing, but something shifted and now that muscle is engaging better, that might very well be what's happening. That you had an imbalance that might now be correcting, because you could be slightly leaning on one leg and now you're getting more even. So the weaker leg is now working harder and that's why it's sore. I would bet that it's probably a good sign that something is rebalancing itself out and it's exposing the imbalance now, and it's going to be working itself in time. All right. One more question real quick. Guy Cool is saying, hey, Matt, is it good to hold ISO chain for 1 minute? Sure. Why not? You do want to kind of be mindful of when you're not sending new information into the muscles, though. This is the same thing with volume and dynamic exercise. It's general volume. When you're doing an exercise, you want to feel like I'm telling my muscles they need to perform. I'm telling them they need to step up. But if you do anything long enough, you eventually just get to the point of, I'm just doing it to do it. I'm just getting through it. Kind of like if you go out for a run, and for the first couple of miles, you're like, okay, good pace, hips engaged. Yep, I'm pushing my pace. It's good. My breathing, okay. But eventually you just kind of get into the point of like, I'm just trying to get home. I'm just going on autopilot kind of thing. Same deal with isometrics or even dynamic exercise. When you notice that your ability to do the exercise is just kind of plateaued, you're not generating much more tension in the muscle and you're just holding it for the sake of, I'm just kind of holding it and waiting for the clock to tick down. You're probably not doing a whole lot at that point. But if you're holding for a minute and you're like, holding, come on, yes, a little bit more, beep. Okay, good, done. It's probably worthwhile to hold it for a minute. I've heard from people who hold isometrics for 5 minutes, even more than 5 minutes. I don't know how they're keeping their focus with that sort of thing, but long-term isometrics can be a fun thing to experiment with. I haven't done it myself, but I don't see anything wrong with it, as long as you're just making something happen. Okay, my friends, it is time for me to vamos and talk to you next time. Don't forget to check out the links down below for the Red Delta Project library, grind style calisthenics, micro workouts, Overcoming Isometrics book that I talked about earlier, the best way to improve the tension control in your muscles. If there's one book that can radically improve the effectiveness of every workout you ever do for the rest of your life, it's that one, Overcoming Isometrics, down below in the description. And thank you everybody for your questions today. Sincerely appreciated. We will do this again potentially next week, although I may have something that's keeping me from it, but I will let you know on the RDP Instagram channel. Make sure you're following me on Red Delta Project on Instagram, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you so much as always. Be fit and live free.